Some truths remain hidden behind walls of silence. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the high walls of Wandsworth Prison on August 9th, 1949, an unsettling stillness clung to the corridors. The unremarkable hum of a typical prison morning, guards performing head counts, distant gates clanking open and shut, seemed to echo with an undercurrent of finality. Beyond the steel bars and the narrow window of his cell stood John Haigh, a figure known to the world for the horrors he had inflicted, now poised at the brink of fate. In the earliest light, the day seemed ordinary, yet it carried the weight of an unalterable conclusion. Exactly one day remained until his scheduled execution. No voices broke the silence of his cell, and no exchange of words punctuated the morning routine. Instead, there was the faint rustle of bedding as he stirred, the controlled shuffle of the guard's footsteps in the hallway, and the distant drone of other inmates stirring for breakfast. Outside his door, the fluorescent bulbs buzzed faintly, fighting against the weak dawn light creeping through. The shadows lengthened and receded, dancing across the concrete floor in patterns that captured the tensions of the hour. Somewhere in the bowels of the prison, a kettle boiled water for the inmates' morning tea, a mundane detail that might have passed unnoticed on any other day. Today, though, everything felt magnified. The rattle of keys, the scrape of a tin plate, and the faint clang of metal doors took on the resonance of a drum roll. Haigh stood in the stark solitude of his cell, his movements measured, his breath steady, as though determined to maintain composure in the face of inevitable doom. Still locked in darkness mere minutes before dawn, he likely gazed upon the small patch of sky he could see through the barred window, one of the last dawns he would ever witness. Beneath that somber glow, the recollection of his crimes and the unstoppable march toward retribution formed an invisible cage within the prison walls. The bleak corridor outside was patrolled by unspeaking guards who cast fleeting glances at him, their expressions etched with the realization of what the next sunrise would bring. The prison routine pressed forward with rigid punctuality. A meager breakfast was slipped through the slot in the cell door. Perhaps bread, margarine, and a small serving of tea. The fragrance, or lack thereof, of such a humble meal hung in the air, emphasizing that this was not a morning of indulgence or ceremony, but a strict adherence to the protocol of final hours. Each morsel, each swallow, would be one of his last, though no one uttered such words. The specter of the gallows loomed beyond every bite. Even the skies outside seemed laden with a foreboding hush, clouds gathering as if mirroring the gravity of the day. Haigh's final 24 hours had begun, and though the sun rose slowly, it brought no warmth of hope. His footsteps on the concrete, soft, deliberate, were a testament to the strange calm that can envelop a man who knows there is no turning back. The morning air carried an indescribable tension, as though the very building itself recognized that its walls contained a man for whom the end had finally come. In this charged atmosphere, each minute carried an amplified significance. The measured ticks of the hallway clock resonated through the corridors, counting down the moments. There would be no second chances, no reprieves. Outside, the world continued its mundane routine. Newspapers hitting doorsteps, buses shuttling commuters. But within Wandsworth's austere confines, a final chapter was unfolding. And as the sun climbed a little higher, John Haigh's final day advanced, step by careful step, toward its fateful conclusion. As the hours of August 9th wore on, the prison's daily cadence continued with a meticulous rhythm. Guards conducted their checks, and the prison staff went about their usual duties, but a near palpable awareness of what lay ahead clung to the corridors. No conversations flowed from Haigh's cell. Only the sound of regulated breathing and the occasional shuffle of feet betrayed any sign of life behind the steel door. Throughout the day, administrative procedures intertwined with the hum of final preparations. Some staff members carried paperwork back and forth, reflecting the gravity of a case that had captured national attention. From a respectful distance, they observed Haigh's condition, his posture upright, his demeanor composed, his gaze focused on the indefinite middle distance. Echoes of footsteps reverberated through the stone hallways, as if underscoring each passing minute. Outside, an overcast sky dimmed the natural light, intensifying the atmosphere inside those bleak walls. A faint draft rattled through the corridors, carrying with it the heavy scent of disinfectant and a residual tension that simmered among the warders. Brief glimpses of Haigh were caught through the observation window, a figure who neither raged nor begged, exuding an unsettling calm that defied expectations. All around, the unspoken realization persisted. When night fell, another layer of finality would settle over him. Though no words were exchanged, the day pressed inexorably forward, bringing the end ever closer with each ticking second. As afternoon gently surrendered to evening, the quality of light within the prison shifted from stark daylight to a dim, golden haze. Long shadows stretched across the corridors, and the electric hum of overhead lamps began to supplement the fading sun. Those final daylight hours ticked by in a hush, as if the entire facility was bracing itself for what the morning would bring. From an observer's standpoint, nothing overtly dramatic occurred within Haigh's vicinity, yet there was a palpable sense of tension in the air. Guards paused more frequently near his cell, their silent vigil reinforced by the knowledge that each glance might be one of the last. Occasionally, a senior official would appear, performing final reviews of documents, but never speaking a word within Haigh's earshot. Outside, the distant drone of traffic reminded everyone that life continued as normal beyond these walls, though it felt anything but ordinary on the inside. In a faintly lit corridor, a wall-mounted clock advanced steadily toward the night, the faint ticking echoing like a metronome of impending fate. Haigh's final hours of daylight passed without outward turmoil, yet an undercurrent of apprehension ran beneath the surface. In these last steps of the day, each sound, each beam of waning sunlight seemed to carry an unspoken message of finality. Beyond the gates, a world of speculation and sensational headlines waited, but within the prison's confines, the moment was quietly profound. Shadows grew, the temperature cooled, and tension coiled, preparing to unfurl with the dawn. Morning arrived on August 10th with merciless punctuality. The clock struck the earliest hours, and the prison routine flickered to life once more, this time with an even heavier solemnity. There would be no public spectacle here, only a strict adherence to procedure. Behind closed doors, the final steps were about to be taken. John Haigh was escorted from his cell in the dawn's pale light, footsteps echoing in the silence. The corridor he walked was narrow, every inch imbued with history and dread. A small assembly of officials and the executioner stood by, each performing a duty locked in a tradition as old as the institution itself. There was no exchange of parting words, no final protest or declaration. There was only the resigned progression toward the gallows. The environment was sterile, stripped of any hint of mercy or comfort. A faint echo of distant activity, perhaps the shuffle of other inmates or the hush of a guard's radio, lingered in the background. Then, as Haigh stepped onto the trapdoor, the last flickers of hesitation vanished into the hush. Time seemed to freeze for an instant, and in that suspended moment, every flicker of light, every breath, carried the weight of a concluding chapter. The mechanism was swift. The wooden beams, the rope, and the finality. In one decisive second, John Haig's story ended, marked by the abrupt silence that followed. It was an ending that closed the book on a dark series of crimes, leaving behind only the echoes of an irreversible fate. When news of John Haig's execution spread, it was as though an electric current surged through the public consciousness. Newspapers, already primed with sensational headlines, quickly rolled off the presses, announcing to the world that the acid bath murderer had met his end. From the bustling streets of London to the quiet towns of the countryside, people reacted with a mixture of relief, grim satisfaction, and lurid curiosity. Vendors held up front pages, the ink still fresh, proclaiming that a monstrous chapter in criminal history was at last concluded. Radio broadcasts interrupted their regular programming to deliver the story, recounting how Haigh had spent his final hours within the confines of Wandsworth Prison. Some outlets spoke of the methodical calm he reportedly displayed, while others dwelled on the grotesque nature of his crimes. In pub corners and family living rooms, the discussion focused on the details of his final day. How he ate, how he stood, whether he showed remorse. Across the nation, people wondered if any final insight had been gleaned into the mind of a man who had orchestrated such heinous acts. As images of the prison gates circulated, so did speculation about the exact mechanics of Haigh's last moments. Official statements were sparse and pragmatic, providing only the barest details of procedure. But the shock remained, fueled by the knowledge that in the span of a single sunrise, society had both witnessed and sanctioned a life ending under the law. The fleeting spectacle faded back into routine, yet the reverberations of Haigh's legacy would continue to intrigue and disturb the public for years to come. In the days following John Haigh's execution, a swirling cloud of speculation and theory took shape. Echoes of his crimes hung in the air, fueling rumors that perhaps his death was just one piece of a larger, more complex puzzle. Did he truly operate alone, or had there been a hidden accomplice, never exposed to the glare of the courtroom? Had he exaggerated certain claims to perpetuate a final drama that would endure long after the news had done its work? Some members of the public, still reeling from the gruesome details of his acid dissolution method, refused to believe that such horror could be contained in a single individual. Others insisted he had misled investigators with tall tales of vampiric impulses and illusions of immunity from prosecution. In hushed conversations, theories multiplied, hinting at the possibility of additional victims, covered up by clever tricks of chemistry and cunning. Official records stood firm: 6 confirmed murders. Haigh himself had boasted of more, though never conclusively proven. As the nation moved on, his name became an unsettling footnote in criminal history, surrounded by whispers of nightmares made real. Some lingered on the question of whether justice had been truly served, or whether the noose was too swift an end for a man who orchestrated such calculated malice. In time, the legend of the acid bath murderer would drift into the realm of dark folklore, but the enigma of his motivations, the true extent of his acts, and the cunning he employed continued to grip the public's imagination. And so, even after his final breath, the lingering shadows of John Haigh's story invite a single, haunting reflection. What truly lies behind the quiet demeanor of evil, and how many answers may remain forever undiscovered?